This is How to AI UXR, an 8-part series that explores how AI is being used across the research workflow, and even how it's exploding it. In each episode, I'll talk with someone who's volunteered to show a thing, so screens on. If you haven't seen it yet, the series pairs with the How to AI UXR map, a 5-page map that will help you pinpoint your AI maturity level and offers practical, real-world applications you can adapt for your research systems. Find the link in the show notes. I'm Kate Towsey, and this series is brought to you by Strela, the AI-powered customer research platform. In this episode, I'm joined by Jordan Brinkman, lead UX researcher at Ergo Next Insurance. Jordan will share a living research brain he built using Claude Code. If you've been struggling to build a research repository and think that AI can help you, but you're just not sure how, this episode is for you. Jordan, it's so good to have you in, I would say in the space, but of course we're virtual, as a guest on the How to AI UXR podcast. You've been showing me something really fascinating that you've been building. And also, just as a side note, you're writing an article for the Research Ops Review on similar themes that we're going to talk about today. What are you going to share with the audience today?
Yeah, I'm going to share what I would call, it's a research repository, but I tend to call it like a Claude Code living research brain, because as we'll see, it's kind of ever evolving and never stops.
And what inspired, and I love the idea of a external brain, and I've been thinking a lot, you know how we've had stories about alien intelligences arriving on planet Earth from Hollywood? I mean, since E.T., that's the first one that I can remember, at least, giving away my age. But now we have this like alien intelligence on planet Earth, and we haven't quite passed the fact that it is like this whole new intelligence. I think that's pretty amazing. And so you have turned it into a librarian, right?
Essentially, yes. Yeah, it does all. Hopefully, we'll do all the bookkeeping for me. Yeah.
And tell me the story behind what inspired you to create the research brain.
Yeah. So as you know, researchers and research ops, research repository has been a challenge that a lot of us have been working on for a very long time, including myself. I've tried a number of tools from Confluence to Airtable and, all of the above. And I've just found it very challenging to make something stick. But once AI came along, it was like a natural thing where, okay, now I can have an LLM read all this information and people can just query it and find exactly what you want. So I built something. I started with Notebook LM last year, which was a good kind of available, accessible resource. But Claude Code has exploded, recently. And so everyone is using that. My company's using it. And so I've been using that a lot at work lately to do stuff. And somebody shared a tweet from Andre Karpathy about this idea for an LLM wiki that just kind of updates itself. So I literally just took the tweet, gave it to Claude Code as a screenshot and said, hey, I want to build this. I gave it some information, told it a little bit of, some specifications, but I just kind of went. And that's kind of what I do with Claude Code. It's you just take something and go and see where it takes you and you just keep evolving it from there. So today, hopefully I can show you of where I'm at today after, a few weeks of working on this.
Very cool. What I love about what you're saying, and something that I've been hearing a lot, is for many people who haven't yet dived into creating and making things with AI as you have, there's still the sense that, whoa, I'm not a developer. I don't know anything about coding. And what you're saying is you took a tweet, or I think you've also at some point had a screenshot of a diagram drawn on a wall. We might show those images as to the audience as well. And from those artifacts, those kind of natural artifacts that you've created as part of consuming content or thinking about a problem, you've been able to build something completely new. That's pretty remarkable. You don't have a background in code or anything like that.
Well, thank you. And no, I do not. Not since Claude Code. I've been using Claude Code personally, just on my own time, just to experiment and sort of learn a little bit of coding. But no, my background is not in coding at all. No.
Yeah. So do you want to screen share, show us I think you were going to start with the schematic of the research brain. and how it all works.
Sure. Yeah. So what we're looking at here is I call it the Claude Code Research Living Brain. So you can take a look at this, for a second here. It's like I can just walk through the steps if you want, and kind of there's, roughly 11 or so steps here. But I think, like the first 4 are some where we could start, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's dive in.
Yeah. So the way it starts is just I'm working in Claude or Claude Code. And let's say, I'm a researcher, I might have a transcript, or I could think broadly. At first it started with transcripts, but then I adapted it to anything. It could be an A/B test result. It could be survey data in a CSV form. It could be a survey I downloaded doing secondary research about our core customer segment. And I just drop that file to Claude and tell it to start the processing, essentially, or whatever you want to call it. And it's a set of Claude skills, if you're familiar with those, and it will just know to kick off that process for step 1. And that's me. So you can see there are different colors here. You can see, it kind of identifies who is doing what here, and there are a variety of human steps here. As some might call it, human in the loop, which I've built in. So after I drop the raw file, then it goes in to identify the resource type. So Claude will then review what it is. Is it a transcript? Is it a report? Is it a survey? And this is sort of like the routing part, because if it identifies a transcript, it will then kick off a different process that I've built and specified for how I want a transcript analyzed, or separate one for how I want a survey data analyzed. And so that's when you kick into the analysis step, which is 3. So that's Claude doing it automatically. It's going to analyze this, write an analysis file. I didn't mention this, but it's writing this all in Markdown files as we go. That's kind of the core structure, or the documents of this that it's writing. And it will analyze it and process it. And then it will then go to step 4, which will cross-reference. So it will have the findings by analysis of this particular document or resource, look across all the other wiki files, which are Markdown files, and a summary file that kind of, it sort of works like RAG, but not. It looks across all of them and will decide how it wants to update those if there are overlapping or other themes emerging. So after it does the cross-referencing, it will have proposed changes to me. That's the step where I'm going to review. And I'm going to review the analysis of that resource and any cross-references that it found in the other Markdown files or other analyses. It could be 20, it could be 50, however many you have. And then I'll kind of stop there after the review, after step 5, because then I have to review it, and then we go into where it's writing new stuff here again.
Can I stop you for a moment there and ask a
Sure.
couple of questions about even getting to these 5 steps?
Mm-hmm.
When you have built the living brain, you mentioned that you've specified how it recognizes a transcript versus a report versus a survey, and then how it analyzes that item. So it will go, this is a transcript and this is how I treat it. Are you using your knowledge as a researcher to do that, or did you pull in papers? How did you make that happen? And is it built into a skill?
Yes, it's built into, to answer the skill part, there are separate skills for each analysis type. So in step 2, it will identify, and then there are skills for each analysis type based on where it's routed. So it'll run. How did I come up with those? It's a combination of me as a researcher and researching best practices online. I don't think I pulled in any papers, and a combination with the initial recommendation from Claude. So Claude originally gave me, each of these skills for each one, how it wanted to analyze. Then I would review that skill. Usually was, let's be honest, it was not really anywhere close to what I wanted initially, but it was a good start. I didn't have to start from scratch. Then I kind of iterate on that skill with my own knowledge. If I was unsure of something or how I wanted it processed, I would go research it myself. A lot of it is specializing the analysis, and then how you want it to output that analysis. What format do you want it in? And that's kind of more up to me. Is what output do I think is the best output for that document?
What I find so interesting about that is that I'm seeing, because of AI, because of a variety of things, but AI is one of the biggest motivators of this that more and more, like I know that you're in this bucket too, researchers are doing a lot more operational work than they would have been doing before, sometimes even full-time with a little bit of research on the side. And at the same time, what I hear you saying, and what I'm seeing very strongly, is that no longer can research operations professionals think, as I have done in the past prior to AI, it's not my job to understand research craft. It's my job to build the systems that support people who are doing research craft. But now, in order to build the systems, you don't need a cursory understanding of research craft. You need a very deep understanding, or you need to have a researcher like you to help you work with these, to work with AI and train it on how to do, something that is methodologically sound.
Yeah, that's right. That's definitely right. And that's what I would say to anyone who's doing this, is anyone could just give the tweet and just build a working wiki probably for anything you're doing on your own. I mean, I've done it for other stuff, essentially just very basic stuff. But for something like this, where it could be in-depth research, there could be specific methodologies for how you would analyze each one. It really does require some of that background knowledge, because you have to go in and evaluate those outputs from Claude and recommend changes for how you want to analyze. So you have to really think about the process and where you're going with it, what you want with it, and to make sure you're getting the level of rigor that you want by cleaning up those initial skills. Because Claude will get a good starting point, I'll say, but it's not 100% there.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, if you want an intern on your team, Claude can build you an intern pretty quickly. But if you want to work with the cream of the crop researcher, you're going to need to kind of do some training.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So do you want to jump into, I think that we were on step 5, and talk us through the remaining steps?
Yes. So you can see here, step 5 is review. So Claude will then review. It will output the analysis that it did and any cross-references that it located in my other files that I've already uploaded. And if I if I don't like them, we can have a back and forth. It'd be like, double check this. I don't like this. Yes, it looks good. Then we'll go forward. And then I will approve the wiki writing. And so it's called a wiki because if you imagine Wikipedia, it's all these pages and nested pages. That's just what we're calling it here, is like a wiki. So that basically what it's going to do is it's going to take the analysis and the cross references, and it's going to write a new file that will write all these additional wiki pages or markdown files, whatever you want to call them. And if there's a new file, if it found some new theme because there were 3 overlaps, it might, ask to write a new page or a new wiki for this particular theme. So it would create a new file in that sense.
And so this is where I'm hearing the living brain part come out, because it's where the living brain is creating its own content and its own information over time. You're validating whether that's correct or not all the time. And therefore, it is getting more markdown files and more referencing and richer outputs all the time. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. Yeah. It could, to contrast that with a Notebook LM. Notebook LM has, I might have 90 resources in there, but it operates more like just a chat, and it can find stuff very well for specific questions. But in this case, I'm taking it, and Claude is so good, and it can do so many things now that I'm just having it do analysis, and with my approval, it will write this. And so then when we have these, we sort of have a database, which is not just a bunch of individual files, but someone has done the higher order analysis. And then we have these, eventually after I process all this, you will have these, key themes for whatever customer segment or your user persona is. It will just be living in a state like that. And you can just keep adding it and keep evolving it over time, the more data you get.
I mean, it's just such a whole new world. I think I will have this annoying kind of tick in this episode of just like, wow. I mean, if someone had seen what you're doing 3-4 years ago, it would have been, it's mind blowing today what we can do. But 5 years ago, I can imagine that we would have just been floored. Okay, so I think we were on step 6, and I'm going to keep quiet now and let you get through the remaining steps.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So once it writes everything, then the other thing actually that I just implemented today were a logging system. So what I realized is I was uploading and testing all these things, but I had no log of what was happening or what files were referenced or what findings were associated to each individual raw source file. So I just said, again, if you run into that problem, my recommendation is just ask Claude and help Claude help you do this. So I just said, hey, we need a better way to log. Here's what I need. Help me work through this. I want to log the files. I want to keep track of every file that's processed. Here's the data I want for each file. I want to know the state that it's in, whatever. I just want a CSV file is essentially what it is of every file that's been added, when it was added, et cetera. All, it's maybe like 6 or 7 columns. And so it does that with every file that's uploaded, and we'll upload it every time a new file is added. So we have a log or a history. And then we'll have another verification checkpoint with me to review the log to make sure everything looks good. That's where I'm at today. So I have it built, it's just running on my local machine, essentially with my Claude Code. But the goal, as a repository is I want anybody at my company to be able to access this. So the way we're operating internally now is we're using GitHub, and Claude Code or Claude can communicate with GitHub. So if I have this in a GitHub repo, anyone at my company could plug into that and ask questions about this. So they could say, what do we know about this user type? Or what will our users think about this? Do we have any research on this? They could query it. That's part 1 or step 10. 11 is, if a product manager has done an interview or an A/B test or another data point or data science, anyone should be able to contribute to this. So they can upload it to GitHub, do a request, and I can approve it. And if it looks good, then we can add new knowledge to the database. And then anyone can be adding to this, and it just grows over time. So that's kind of where I want to get to the team access point. That's my goal, I think, in the next few months. But I'm kind of steps 1 through 8 right now.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, because someone a little while ago said to me, they feel like LinkedIn with AI is like Instagram when you go on holiday and the kids are screaming and you've got hot dog on your face. Those are not the photographs you share. You share the ones of you with the perfect cocktail on the beach, right? And they were saying that they feel like AI is the same. It's like, I've built this amazing thing and my world is now perfect. But oftentimes it's analytical, and we're still figuring how to put this into production in a sense. And this is the really big gap. So I love that you say that, because we are in a experimental making space where you can have this incredible thing you've built. And now the next step is like, how do I scale this out to the rest of the team?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's at least, that's, I think, what I'm figuring out, and probably a lot of other people are trying to figure out, is with Claude Code with me, I can make anything on my local machine at this point that might be useful or could be useful to someone. But the question becomes, internally, do we have a way for people to just deploy stuff? Because I could very easily just make this I could give it a front end and it looks like Wikipedia. I can do it on my local machine, right? I could probably, just open it and it would look like wiki pages. But right now, GitHub is the quickest way we can get access. But I think over time, there will probably have to be some way for people to deploy stuff, because people are creating dashboards, productivity apps, different things people can use that they want other people to be able to access. So could be something completely different from GitHub in 2 months. We'll never know, but it will probably change.
I reckon you might get a message from someone who's listened to this podcast and goes, hey, Jordan, I know how to do that. And it's this kind of sharing that we need to have in the industry right now as we make an experiment to like push each other forward, which I guess is a lot of what this episode and this series is all about. You showed me a second sort of rundown of the system. There were a couple of really interesting notes in there that have been front of many people's minds, and certainly front of my mind, is the human in the loop piece. Where is it best to have a human person? I find it so funny, this sort of language that we're all dropping into using these days, because now we've got machine intelligence and human intelligence. how do you decide where you should have a human person in the loop? A human person. I did it again. Where you could have a human in the loop. There we go. Much better. And where a machine can work solo. I'm really intrigued to hear more about what you've done there.
Yeah, sure. Let me, I can pull up that other view really quick here. It's a little more detailed with the flow here, and I can kind of talk about a few steps. Yeah. So the human in the loop or the checkpoint, that's the main thing I would, in any stage, I recommend it to anyone, especially in research, but just in general with a skill, if you're doing something, I would caution against letting Claude do a very 8-step thing like this without having some checkpoints. Because otherwise you'll get to the end, you'll not only maybe not get what you want, but you won't know where it went wrong, and you'll also have used too many tokens. That's another thing you got to worry about these days is how many tokens is this going to use when I do this with 100 resources? I suppose
That
I'll
is,
find out soon enough.
yeah, that's
Um,
such a good point that you don't want to waste tokens. And so having these checkpoints is one way of being able to call it early if you realize you've gone down the wrong track.
yes. And so to your question about where that analysis goes or the checkpoint goes, I chose the points where it was doing some more. I think if you look here, it says the two first checkpoints are it reviews the analysis and cross-referencing. So I tend to look at these first few as just like doing some processing for me, um, identifying the resource type, and it's pretty good at that. And I've specified that and tested it, so I think I don't need to double check that. But where I found it was sort of getting away from what I wanted was, again, this is trial and error, me running, like 10 of, running it, checking, and identifying those points of where it was not getting what I wanted. And it was where it was doing the more complex stuff, where it was analyzing the resources and telling me what it thought what the analysis was and what was important. That's where it needed me. And that's what I found. And I'm sure other people have that experience. It can give me an analysis of a transcript, but it might not know exactly what I think is the most important. There are ways I can help it doing that by pumping in or piping in context about our business and our goals, etc. That helps it. But I want to review this to make sure it's accurate. Like, are they getting the right stuff? Is it in the right format? Does everything look good before it goes in? And then the cross reference. So then it's analyzing it, but then it's looking across. Admittedly, that one is going to be harder. I think I'll have to think about that one because once it gets over 100 resources, it might be pretty challenging to identify whether or not those are accurate, I guess. But I could tell it whether or not they're meaningful or if it's picking up on the wrong thing, if that makes sense. So those are kind of the two spots that I wanted to stop it before it starts writing all these wiki pages. Because the first time it was just writing like 10 wiki pages, Markdown files, and it wasn't anything that I wanted, not how
And
I
I
wanted
guess
it.
also then it's polluting your. I experienced this actually doing the analysis for how to AI UXR. Of course, I used AI to analyze these 560 something and more data points. And one of the things I learned was that if you just let it run, it will destroy your. I was using a RAG system. I forget now. RAG is a retrieval augmentation. What does the G stand for? I forget. Any notebook
Retrieval
LM is
generation.
generation. That's thank you. Yeah, retrieval augmentation generation. Say that 5 times over and keep it straight. But yeah, like a big part of that was making sure I, in my experimentation, went through I think 3 separate notebook LMs before I realized, wow, you actually have to really monitor the outputs because if you just keep storing the outputs, it can and they're not good outputs, then it will pollute your insights. And so eventually I became quite careful with looking after what was produced. And I'm hearing that you've in this steps 5 and 6 that this is what you found as well.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. And you want to, you want to always keep an eye on it. And yes, it can produce, or it can pollute, like you said. If you don't review that, it could, overgeneralization, I think, is one of the biggest problems I see with doing. There are a lot of issues you could run into, like biases, overgeneralization. But what I find a lot with just qualitative analysis is it will pick up on one thing and it will make it sound like that thing is the most important thing and that all small business owners do this one thing. And that's definitely not true, especially from one interview or from one document. And that also gets into how it processes. I didn't get into this too much, but I have, like observations, findings, and themes or whatever, and I've defined those. But if I give it a survey report from, whoever, online that's done a survey, it might already have the findings sort of identified. So it's just adding that to my database. So it's going to look at that a little bit differently than an individual interview with one user or something. Or an A/B test. It's going to process that a little differently because that's a different type of data. It's across thousands or maybe millions of users, depending on how big your product is. But you got to set all that, plan it, and you got to double check that before it moves on for sure.
Yeah. This limited series is brought to you by Strela, the AI-powered customer research platform. We're taking a short pause to hear from Strela's co-founder, Priya Krishnan, and her perspective on this conversation.
Hi, I'm Priya Krishnan, one of the founders of Strela, and we are an end-to-end AI customer research platform. We use AI to help you come up with the right questions to ask, then run voice-based AI-moderated interviews and synthesize the results instantly. You can think of us as this trusted research partner that takes you from question to insight, developing, running, and analyzing real customer interviews in just a few days rather than weeks. Jordan said something about where he puts the human checkpoints that I think is one of the most transferable ideas in this whole series. So he built an 8-step pipeline that could, in theory, run end-to-end on its own, but he deliberately does not let it. And the interesting part isn't that he adds checkpoints, it's where he adds those checkpoints. He doesn't gate the easy steps, like identifying where a file is a transcript or a survey. He puts the human exactly where the model's confidence outruns its actual judgment, the analysis and the cross-referencing. And his reasoning was so practical. Checkpoints catch the error early, they tell you where it went wrong, and they save you from burning tokens on a run that was off from step 2. And this is exactly how we think about what we're building at Strela, and it's a deliberate choice to not go fully agentic just because we could. We could let the system recruit an audience and launch a study with no one watching, but we don't. There's a checkpoint in recruitment before we ever invite participants, because inviting the wrong audience isn't an error you can quietly fix later. It's the whole study compromised before a single interview runs. And there's a checkpoint built into our discussion guide before anything goes live for the same reason that Jordan stops before the wiki gets written. That's the judgment-dense moment, the one where a human catches what the model can't. So the principle that Jordan drew at the repository level is the one we've drawn at the study level. The skill isn't automating everything you're capable of automating. It's knowing the 2 or 3 moments where a human has to sign off.
Thanks, Priya. Find out more about Strela at strela.io. Back to the episode. So before we drop off of that page, is there anything there that we haven't spoken about that you're thinking, if anyone's going to fire up their Claude Code or something similar and start to build their own research living brain, what tip would you give them before they set out?
While I love the idea, what I did of starting, you can certainly do that of starting with a tweet. It starts with a little idea and you're like, hey, this is amazing. Can I do this? The answer is probably yes in most cases, but don't go too far when you start doing that. Once you get a sense for like, oh, this is what I can do. Here's my constraints. Here's what I really want to build with this. I would just stop, sort of reset and look at what are your goals with this? What do you want to do? And really map out your workflow for what this is going to be. And by that, I mean, how would I do this workflow as a human? Because I need to then explain that to Claude in some way. I need to give him the steps and decide what steps I want to be skills and all this stuff. So you really have to think deeply about that. What I did is I had to go to a whiteboard. It was getting so complicated. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to the whiteboard and map this whole workflow out, how I would do this from start to finish. It was a big whiteboard. I mapped it out. And then I literally just gave that screenshot again to Claude. And we iterated together on what the steps would be. that was kind of the second step. And now I'm here to where I am today, where I have these very concrete steps and skills, which I'm still not done. But those are my two things: is start with the fun, and then eventually stop and remap what you want to do, and really consider mapping out that workflow in detail, because you'll have to explain it to Claude. The better you explain it, the better Claude will be able to do it.
One of the things I keep talking about is I love that we're working with this incredible high technology, and yet we're using Markdown files and CSV files and PDF documents. But also we're going back to the kind of the 1940s, where systems design, according to my history knowledge at least, was really a huge thing, and civic design. And so what I'm hearing you say, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is making can be really addictive. And we know about people getting burnt out, just staying up all night and that one last prompt and that one last tweak. But it is to step back and ask, but why? What am I trying to achieve? What value will this new thing I've made give to the organization or give to me so I can give more value to the organization? What is the purpose of it all? I have a hunch that it's been sort of a free-for-all up until now in terms of no tokens, just make. And it's been really fun and wonderful. For many, not fun, just daunting. But for someone like you who's clearly a maker, a time of real creativity. But now with tokens, for those who don't know, tokens are like I always think of Pac-Man, that like arcade game, chomping on, what was it called? The little, Pac-Man food. But it's the currency that AI uses in order to pass information and do its work. And those are now being charged for because AI compute is so expensive. And so more and more, we're going to have to be careful about what we build and how we build it. So to your point, that it is really efficient with tokens, and don't become just another very, very expensive set of machines that aren't actually delivering value. So I think that's an incredibly valuable point for everybody. I love that you made that. Take a moment, make, play, such an important thing to learn. Take a moment, step back and go, okay, so what is this going to do and what value is it going to deliver?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Something else that has come up that I'd love to talk about before we close up is you're actually writing about this in the article that you're publishing on the review, which will be in a few weeks' time, so well before this episode goes out. And it's about the fact that, which is very related to what we've just been talking about, when you're making, you can end up making all these things and then they all have to be maintained. And is that the thing that you want to be doing with your life or your professional career? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because there's many who would maybe only be coming across this issue now and going, whoa, okay, what is my job?
Yeah, it's definitely true. I feel like, I first realized this even before Claude Code. Claude Code is the new thing now in a lot, since January or whatever. But even last year, the year before, I noticed this when I would have 20 Gemini tabs or 20 ChatGPT tabs open at work doing analysis for a project. And I would be having these multiple strings of conversations with ChatGPT, and I would forget where I was. And so eventually what came out of that was then I needed a Google Doc with a table that I would cross-link all of the conversations that I had for this analysis so I could keep track of them all. Now I bake that into this Claude living brain here, where Claude kind of keeps track of that for me. But still maintaining this, it almost, I think you mentioned, deployment, or you're developing a product at some point. It almost kind of feels like that, where you're testing it, you're developing it, you're iterating on it over and over, and you have to maintain those. It's not just a document I upload to Google Drive now and I move on, or a report I share and move on. It's you're creating these things that are hopefully useful to people. That the why am I doing this question, but also you have to maintain them and make sure you keep iterating it and do the quality checks and all this stuff. And again, the one last prompt is something that I run into every day when I'm working on this. It's like, okay, I'm almost I almost got these criteria written for this. Let me run a few more tests here and see where it's going, so that I'm waiting. So that is definitely true, and I've felt it more with Claude Code now, because you're actually building something. It's not just tabs. Now I'm building something. And you need Claude to also keep track of other recommendation. I just have a project status Markdown file that after each working session with Claude, I just ask Claude to update this with the key decisions we made today, what we changed, and where I'm going to start tomorrow, because otherwise I'll forget. Because I might have 2 or 3 things going on with Claude Code in one day. So there's context switching, and I might forget where I left off with this particular one.
That's such a good tip. And it does make me think, I've managed teams in the past, and I feel many times I'm working on my own, but with various agents. I use Notion agents. And I feel like I'm managing a team again, literally. And so it's so true. You end up kind of managing various intelligences to do all this work, and that's a full-time job.
Imagine that you're working with someone. If I'm iterating, I'm just going back and forth, and they're giving me their work, and I'm evaluating it, and I'm going, making some changes and giving them feedback. And then, there could be multiple agents running at once. If I upload 3 resources, you have 3 agents independently processing each resource. And then I have to review all these outputs. So it is like it's not only the upkeep, but you're also, you're managing a team of agents in some sense. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. I did at one point debate. I think the collective term that's coming out for agents right now is a squad of agents. But I've been very curious to see what that collective term is. Jordan, it's been intriguing to learn about the Research Living Brain. Thank you so much for sharing it. If someone wants to reach out and ask more questions about it, where should they reach you? I'm assuming you're open to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to reach out to me would probably just be find me on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Feel free to send me a message if you have any questions or any input, or you're doing something like this. Please let me know. I'm still learning about this too, and I'm sure there are ways I could improve it. So I'm open to it for sure.
Well, we'll share your LinkedIn in the show notes. Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to How to AI UXR. This series was produced by the Research Ops Review and sponsored by Strella, the AI-powered customer research platform. Find the How to AI UXR map in the show notes. The map details how research professionals worldwide are augmenting UXR at the crawl, walk, and run levels of complexity.